All righty, we are live. Andy Schoonover, thank you so much for joining me, man.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, a lot of people in Bitcoin know you as the main healthcare go-to when talking about these issues and how fiat has taken its hold in this world as well. We will dive real deep into that, but first of all, I'd like to hear your story. I know you have a great one through the educational system, through the unique connection with the social network movie, and into
No.
multiple healthcare forays. So why don't you just tell us that story, man?
Yeah, sure. No, I guess start back at I went to Virginia undergrad, and came out of Virginia doing of all things real estate. So I was doing hospitality real estate, and I graduated way back in 2001. So I graduated in May of '01. I start my job in July of '01, and then what happened September 11th of '01 happens. And we actually owned the company I worked for owned the big hotel that sat at the base of the World Trade Center. And so I
Wow.
actually spent my first a year, 18 months, something like that, kind of negotiating with, all the stakeholders in Southern Manhattan to, get out of that transaction something. Insurance providers, and it was actually there's a lease on it and a sublease on it and all that kind of stuff. So it was an interesting introduction to the real world. And so did that for a few years, then went out to Stanford for business school. And between my first year and second year, we actually had a house out in Silicon Valley. And so between the first year and second year, me and the four other guys that I lived with went and all over the country did our internships. And so we got this guy from Boston show up who wanted to rent our house from us. We actually put our house up on Craigslist to sublet for the summer, and it ended up being Mark Zuckerberg. And so there's a kind of a subplot in the movie The Social Network where Eduardo had to go get, I forget what it was, 16 or $18,000 from his dad to pay for this house that they were going to live in Silicon Valley as they transitioned from Boston. Well, that was actually my house. So it was a fun thing. There was no zip lines from the chimney, although there was a pool in the backyard, and the house in the movie actually looked a lot like the real house that they went to. So that's my whatever 15 minutes of fame. And the funny story around that too is I I in my trash can when I got back from the summer, there was a receipt with Mark Zuckerberg's name on it, and it was for the Ritz Carlton in New York. And so one of my classmates worked for Excel Ventures, which was the first venture capital firm that invested in Facebook. And so I went to him and I said, "Can you believe that they're spending all your money on fancy pants hotels and all this kinds of stuff?" And you got to remember that back in 2000, and this was 2005, they were only in like 6 or 8 schools. You had to have a .edu email address to be a part of it. And he just looked at me. He's like, "It's going to be okay." He's like, he knew
He
that it
knew.
was going to be huge. And so anyway, that was kind of a fun little story that I tell, fairly often. But coming out of Stanford, a lot of my buddies were doing Google and Facebook, and Silicon Valley was crazy at that time. Um, and I decided to do something different. I actually bought a little company, of all places, Dayton, Ohio. So I moved from Silicon Valley to Ohio. Ran that company for 7 years, sold it to a private equity firm. Moved to Texas, and kind of along the way, got married and had a couple kids. And that kind of where this is where Crowd Health comes into play, and my healthcare, a lot more my healthcare background. But when my little one was 1, she kept having recurring ear infections. And so if you're a parent listening to this, you know what this is like. Like, they stay up at night and they cry and whine, and it's a 1-year-old. Like, it's just, and it magnified by 10x when they have an ear infection. So we went to the ear, nose, and throat doctor, who told us that she had a hole in her eardrum and that we would need to get tubes in her ears. And so we went to the local hospital, got tubes in her ears. It was a 15-minute procedure. We got the bill, and it was $8,000. And it was like, holy crap, like this system is so screwed up. $8,000 for a 15-minute procedure. And then a few weeks later, my health insurance plan called and or sent me a note and said that they weren't going to pay for it because it was medically unnecessary. And so I had to stroke an $8,000 check to the local hospital because my health insurance plan wouldn't pay for it. And it was at that point where I was like, screw this. This system is so messed up. I'm not doing this. And so we canceled our health insurance and we have been uninsured since. So that was 3.5 years ago or something like that we've been uninsured, and started Crowd Health to help people like us who are uninsured, and we kind of say delightfully uninsured, navigate the healthcare system without having health insurance. And it's actually, as I said, it's freeing, it's delightful. It's between me and my doctor now, not between my doctor and my health insurance plan, what kind of care I can get. It's an incredible thing that we've been able to experience, and happy to go into it more. But that's a brief history of Crowd Health, how I got here, and a little bit of background.
Excellent, sweet. So I'm not sure if you follow Heavily Armed Clown on Twitter. He's one of the guys that made the What the Fuck Happened in 1971 website. And
Yeah.
I grabbed one of his tweets yesterday because I thought it'd be perfect for this. He says, "It seems counterintuitive, but not having health insurance is one of the best decisions I've ever made. Being a cash pay patient makes it way easier to get what you want from your healthcare providers, doesn't leave you subject to the whims of insurance companies, and ends up saving you a lot of money." So when people from the traditional healthcare system, and it's impossible for me to not mention my mom here.
Last time I
She grew,
checked, by the way, he was a member of ours. He's a
yeah,
member of Crowd
yeah,
Health.
yeah. Good point. I forgot to mention. People who come from the traditional side, and the one that I always mention is my own mom because she grew up as a nurse. She worked as a nurse her whole life, and so she's always making sure that I'm insured by health insurance. And so when someone from that old paradigm hears this idea of not having insurance, it gives them a brain aneurysm because it seems unsafe and crazy. Now, what would you say to those people that just think this sounds ridiculous?
Well, I think it's not too dissimilar from the way that your mom or other people in that generation look at Bitcoin. Like they think you're nuts. They
Hmm.
think you're like you're a total crazy person. What do you mean that the U.S. dollar is going to fail? So we can kind of look at the stats. Like I think everybody knows deep down that health insurance sucks. Like I don't think there's a lot of people who are out there being like health insurance is great. It's I think people intuitively know that like this is a business that is not set up to help them. Whenever you're dealing with a health issue, like your health insurance plan seems like your enemy, not your ally. That you're fighting with them to get your bills paid. And so I kind of say is like, well, what if you had a company who is fighting with you to get your bills paid and was actually being your ally? And so if you think about these big, huge corporations, like they have an incentive and it's not you, it is to maximize profit. Like, and I don't have any problem with that, but there's ramifications of that. Right. And so, their end kind of customer are hospital systems and big companies, big corporations, and not you, And so, I would argue with her and say, hey, look, the ultimate goal of health insurance is to get your bills paid. And I would argue health insurance companies in many ways don't get your bills paid. So in fact, 46 million claims were denied last year by Obamacare plans. They only have 15 million people in those plans. So that means on average, 3 claims per year per person were denied by these health plans. That's Kaiser Family Foundation data. Like, and so if you can't really rely upon your health insurance company to pay the bills, then why do you have health insurance?
Hmm.
And so that's what I would tell her is I don't think it's actually as a home run as you think it is, or a high probability of getting your bills paid as you think it is. And as a result of that, we have something like 200,000 families every year go bankrupt due to a medical event, even though they have health insurance. So the whole point of insurance is to not put you in financial distress if something bigger were to happen. 200,000 families plus went bankrupt last year because they had a big health event with health insurance. I mean, that's preposterous to me. That tells me that this system is not working. In the same way we've had 0 people go bankrupt, we've had 0 medical debt taken on from our members. Over 5,000 people we've been around for 2 years now, 0 medical debt. And so that's what we're trying to disrupt here is like people shouldn't go into medical debt or go bankrupt as a result of having a health event. Like that's ridiculous.
Yeah, and the entire business model of insurance is just mind-boggling to me how this is even a giant industry across the board. I had a short stint while I was traveling in New Zealand, and as a backpacker over there, we can get certain jobs as like an extra way to make a few bucks. And I found my way into one of the main insurance companies there. They were just getting a bunch of like low-level salespeople on the phone. So this was the first time I had ever really even learned anything about insurance. And right away, I was just thinking, like, how does this work? Like, in order for this company to make money, they need to screw people, like the people that are relying on them, because you've got the premiums, which are the primary source of revenue. The customers are just paying them this money, and their losses are helping their customers. So when you lose money from providing the service that people sign up for you for, that doesn't seem like a great model for anybody. So
Yeah, and it's actually even worse than that, right? So, you know, these are for-profit entities generally, and even if they're not for-profit, they act like for-profits. And so with Obamacare, they max you out at 15% of premiums can be used for your administrative cost and your profit. So if you have $1,000 premium, the max they can use or profit is $150. And so how do they grow their profit by 10%? Well, that would have to go from 150 to 165, which means their premium has to actually go up. Like they have an incentive for you to pay more for healthcare because that means they pay more money. So over a long period of time, they have an incentive to see premiums to go up. Over a short period of time in this year, right? Just what you said, premiums are the revenue, claims are the expenses. They have a desire to cram down expenses as low as possible to maximize that 15%. So you're screwed in the short term and screwed in the long term. So we have a principal agent problem here where, your agent, the health insurance company, we're the principals, we pay them, they're our agent, are incentivized to work against us. Like that's what's so screwed up about this. So they have an incentive for the prices to go up, and then the sellers of healthcare services, the hospitals have an incentive for the prices to go up. And so what? If you don't have to take Econ 101 to understand this. If you have a buyer and a seller both wanting the price to go up, the price is going up. Like that's in a very simplistic way, but accurate, why our healthcare dollars are increasing so quickly.
gotcha. Yeah. So something I think that would be helpful for myself and other people who are relatively idiots at this whole system of fiat. And the reason why I am is because the way I'm wired is when I can tell something is so screwed up and it needs to be disrupted, I just don't spend energy on it. And for the same reason, I don't spend a ton of my life learning the intricacies of the bond market and derivatives and real estate and all these parts of the current fiat money world, because I'm so confident at this point that Bitcoin is going to disrupt everything. I'm putting 100% of my time on Bitcoin. So I leave that to the Lynn Aldens and the Luke Gromans, the James Lavishes, the macro folks who really have that technical brain to parse through that sea of
Mm-hmm.
bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
And in the same sense, uh, on healthcare side, as I've gone through a few jobs in my young adult life, and I go through these health insurance deals through my work, I'm deciding between plans. What the heck is a copay and a premium and a deductible? Like, how do I choose a plan based on like high premiums, low deductible, low premiums, high deductible? Um, when I see that, it's just like, oh man, it's such a slog for me to like learn that stuff, because I know that this is not going to last forever. It doesn't make sense for people. Everyone hates it, and it's just
Yeah.
I don't want to touch it. So if you could walk us through how it actually works behind the scenes because you understand that better than pretty much anybody I know. Say I get hurt and I break my arm, I go to the doctor and I need help. How does that mechanism work? The Rube Goldberg machine of patient going to doctor through, and then there's like the insurance mess. How does that all go through step by step?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you stated was, man, so true, because what I feel like health insurance or healthcare does, it kind of whips you into apathy. It's so complex, that people just are like, all right, I will pay somebody to figure it out for me, right? And that's either my employer or a broker or both or whatever. And so those jobs, right? Like, the more complex it is, the more jobs you create. And so it's very difficult to convince somebody of something that takes food off of their table. And so these people all think like this is the right way of doing this. In terms of kind of the mechanisms on the back end, if I don't know where you want to start with that, but you know, if you start with the incentives of the system, I think that's probably the right place to start,
Sure. Yeah.
because everybody is going to operate in their best incentive, and that's just kind of how we work. I mean, it's the basics of economics, and our monetary system has gotten screwed up because politicians want to say yes to everything, and because they want to get elected, because they want to have control, and that means running huge deficits, which means we're going to print a crap load of money, which ultimately leads to inflation, which ultimately leads to the downfall of the dollar. And there has to be a great alternative for that, right? And Bitcoin, I agree with you, is the clear winner of that. In the healthcare space, what we have learned to do, what we've been kind of psyoped to think is all we have to do is put down our insurance card, and then we don't worry about it. But you do have to worry about it because the explanation of benefits comes around on the other end, and you have this big deductible that you have to hit before the health insurance plan will pay anything, right? And so I think it's a great place to start where, look, everybody's got a deductible. And people don't understand this, but you have to understand what that deductible is, because that's the most important number. It's not what you pay on a month-to-month basis. Because if you have a deductible of $5,000 or $7,000, you better have $5,000 or $7,000 liquid to be able to pay that deductible. Because if you go to the hospital, guess what? It's $5,000 to $7,000. Like, you're out. And so you got to have that amount of money. And then above the deductible, there's typically what is called a co-insurance. So the health plan will take only 80% oftentimes of the expenses above that deductible, and then you get 20% up to a max out of pocket, right? So that's a crazy system that you have to understand when you get into this health insurance world that most people don't, right? And so, I think the mechanics of this, right, is typically I lay down an insurance card. For every doctor in a doctor's offices, there's 3 people that are doing the billing, right? So a ton of administrative costs. They send an electronic claim to an insurance company. An insurance company will typically just run it through an algorithm that will say approved or not approved. And then that insurance company will pay oftentimes a percentage of what the doctor asks for in return. And the doctor kind of is like, I get what I get, there's nothing they can do about it. And then the doctor, they don't get enough. They have all these billing people fight with the insurance plan to get more money out of the insurance plan. And in essence, what that does, it costs 30 to 40% of your premiums is just in that back and forth of billing between insurance plan and doctor. One other thing
And
I
I'm sure
forgot.
no one's skimming money off the top just to
Oh,
pad
not
their
at all.
coffers either.
There's actually companies, entire industries called revenue cycle management companies, that what they do is they, in your electronic medical record, they ensure that you say certain things in that electronic medical record so that you can bill the insurance plan as much as possible, right? if you say that you have, this versus one deviation off of it, that could be 2 times the amount of reimbursement. So they're going to try to get you to here so that they can get reimbursed 2 times what they could get here. There's whole industries around how to maximize billing. And ultimately, it's coming out of my pocket and your pocket, right? If you're a part of insurance, because we're paying more for it. And we think our corporation is paying for it. But guess what? The money that they're paying for the insurance that they're giving you could be paid into your pocket, but they can't pay you directly for it. They have to pay for your health insurance. So you are paying for all of this. So it's kind of, that was a long-winded way of saying there are lots of people in the middle of this. All of them are, a bunch of rent seekers, in the middle of this, that should be completely cleared out. And I know we'll talk about our model in a little bit, but we try to clear out as much of that as possible, so that it is truly between the patient and the doctor. I say often, whoever pays you is who you work for, right? You work for whoever pays you. And so if you're going to see your doctor with an insurance plan, who's paying your doctor? The insurance plan is paying your doctor. So your doctor works for your insurance plan. Your doctor does not work for you. If you go in with a credit card and say, doctor, I'm paying you, guess what? Now the doctor's working for you. You can take the government out from under between you. You can take the insurance plan out from between you. And you can actually have a true doctor-patient relationship, which is pretty cool when you see it actually, live. Because it is different if I go into the doctor paying in cash versus paying with an insurance company. It is a
And
totally different experience.
and that's something I feel like a lot of us patients, when we just walk in to get care, we aren't even thinking about the doctor side of this either. I went to a school with a lot of a big medical program, so a lot of my friends work in medicine. They're doctors now, and this is not good for them either.
No.
This is only good for the gatekeepers. They're just throwing up as many roadblocks as possible to skim money off of people that don't have the gargantuan mental bandwidth of being able to parse through all this. It's because it's impossible.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
totally.
quick shout
And
out
this is
to
not the doctor's fault. Like, everybody points at the doctors like, oh, these doctors get paid so much. Doctors
yeah.
get 8% of our healthcare costs go to doctors. 8%. Like, we could cut their salaries in half and we'd only gain 4%, right? Like, who cares? We are twice the amount per capita in the United States as any other developed country. So you'd have to slice a lot of 4% to get to, the difference.
Mhm.
So it is not the doctors. The doctors are put in the system that they just have to operate within to the best of their ability. And most of them are getting frustrated and worn out and burnt out and are retiring and are looking for other things. And that's I think a pretty substantial issue for our system in general.
Definitely. And I listened to your podcast with Robert Breedlove as I was preparing for
Yeah.
this, and one of the things you guys talked about was I think he was the one that tweeted out this graph of the administrative workers versus
Yeah.
the doctors. The doctor line is tiny and admin is just going through the roof. And
Yeah.
that's basically just showing exactly what you're talking about there, how all the paper pushers are needed because it's so complicated and it's increasing in complication over time, and the doctors are just trying to do their job. These people are there for the vast majority of the time because they want to help people. They want to help their patient. They want
That's
there to
right.
be a relationship there where they can help people directly, but instead they're stuck in a system where everything is made extremely complicated. So what is the death star of this that is causing the problem we need to go after? Is it the hospital system? Is it the insurance companies? Some mix of the two, the government for putting mandates and regulations on this.
Yeah, I mean, I really do believe that it's primarily, it starts with the government. The government are putting the insurance plans and the hospitals in just a system in which, like, they're going to try to maximize profit, and I get that. Like, I don't have any problem with that. I think a maximization of profit with within a system in which the government is not involved is the right way to go. But the government actually puts so many kind of regulations around the health care system that it's almost impossible for there to be any free market within that. I mean, if you think about this, right, if they mandate that employers over 50 people have give their employees health insurance, and oftentimes, those corporations don't negotiate with these health insurance companies because they don't want to piss off all of their employees. And so, the health insurance plan comes in and says, I'm going to give you a 10% raise. And the company's going to be like, all right, I'm going to take 10% raise. There's nothing they really can do about it. And so there's a kind of an oligopoly on one side with basically 4 or 5 plans that own the entire health insurance space. It's they're called BUCA plans: Blue Cross, United, Cigna, Aetna, and if you want to add one more, Humana, although Humana doesn't do corporates anymore. So it's BUCA, BUCA. There's 4 plans that own the vast majority of the market, and so you can't really negotiate with them. Now, if me and you were actually able to go and negotiate with the health plans, like, in a free market system, those health insurance plans would actually have an incentive to see prices go down, because me and you would go with the lowest cost price, but we're not the ones who are making the decision. It's the employers that are making the decisions. So that's just one area in which, they are defeating the market forces within, a system there that about over 50% of Americans get their insurance through their employer. So that's just one example. Another example is this 15% administrative cost for these health plans that we kind of mentioned. You can only take 15% of your premium as profit. And so they have no desire to or ability to maximize profit. They can't maximize profit because the government limits their ability to do that. A third example is the government says a doctor in Texas can't provide care to a patient in Oklahoma without being certified in Oklahoma. Like, people are that different between Texas and Oklahoma. And so you have to have these doctors are all siloed in their states. And so you can't provide services, across state lines, which has a really big impact on cost of care. So I could go on and on and on about these, but there's government regulation after regulation and regulation that's masked in consumer protection. But in essence, what it does is that it inflates the cost of care significantly. Switzerland has a private healthcare system. It's all private health insurance companies, but the government regulations are not nearly as much as what they are in the United States. And Switzerland, which is one of the most expensive places on the planet, has health insurance costs half of what they are in the United States. Outcomes are just as good, but the costs are half. The government is the difference there. So I think it's the government is the ultimate issue.
And on that vein, I hear a lot of people in America think that places like Canada are this utopia where healthcare is amazing because you can go in and it's free. And but I have friends in Canada and they tell me not so fast.
Yeah.
What do people have wrong about this idea that Canada has like more of a government safety blanket, so it's easier to get care? Why does that not work as beautifully as a lot of American people think so?
Well, a lot of people come to the United States to get their health care done. I mean, from Canada. I mean, I literally have a direct message on Twitter from a Canadian Airlines pilot who said, "Hey, I'm in the United States all the time because I fly for Canadian Airlines. Do you guys help me? Can I sign up for CrowdHealth because I want to get my healthcare in the United States? Because if I have an issue in Canada, I have to wait forever to get it dealt with." He said his parents, who are both 80 years old, have a traveler's insurance that basically allows them to travel to the United States if they have healthcare issues, because in Canada they can't get help. So, look, the best doctors on the planet are in the United States. The best facilities on the planet are in the United States. Should we pay a little bit more if we have the best facilities and the best doctors? Yes. Should it be 100% more? No. You can move to Canada if you want to. You're going to pay higher taxes. Your care is going to be dictated by the Canadian government, what you can and cannot get. You're going to wait forever. And so that minimizes freedom from me, from my perspective. And what we're trying to do is maximize freedom. We want you to be able to go to whatever doctor you want to, whenever you want to go to them. It's up to you. It's your money. That should be the way. Canada actually, it is illegal for you to pay a doctor in cash. They have to get paid by the government. You cannot pay them in cash. It's illegal.
I didn't know that.
Like, that's the craziness of that system. So yeah, go for it. Go up to Canada. One, it's cold as get out. But two is their health and their system is terrible if you want service now.
The trade-offs.
Yeah. It's the trade-off. So, what do you want to, which trade-off do you want? I prefer a little bit more expensive and be able to access it now. I think there's a cardiologist wait. It was something crazy, like 45 weeks or something like that. Like, you had to wait 45 weeks to see a cardiologist during COVID. And it's just like, that makes no sense.
And there's just lines of people that are there for not bad actor reasons, like trying to get cheap free drugs because it's so easy. So they got lines out the door for that too. And it's very interesting. And it's interesting how people from different places are going for the other one when the whole time, like, they both have similar problems of bureaucracy. It's just one, it's expensive as hell. One, you have to wait forever, so you never actually get the care.
Right. Exactly.
So we're definitely getting close to bringing CrowdHealth up here. I'm more just making sure we lay all the groundwork down.
No, it's good. This is all good. This is all good groundwork. I can tell you, like, Canada, Brazil, what is the other one I get a lot of? The UK. I get a lot of people on Twitter. And if you follow us on Twitter, you see these. When the UK, when Australia, when Mexico, when Canada, when are you going to bring these things to our country? Because there's a desire. You can look at another country and say, oh, it's utopia. It ain't if you live there.
People get so hung up on their country is bad. They think it has to be better somewhere else. And then once you develop a network of people in all these countries and actually talk to them, you hear that they have a whole different kind of problem. That, wait a minute, you don't actually want that.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too is people look at the United States and they say our outcomes are really bad. If you take a look at infant deaths and childbirth is high in the United States. Maternal deaths in childbirth is really high. Our life expectancy is lower than the average. And so they're like, how can you be spending so much money on healthcare and have these low outcomes? It's people are having a bit of a problem with cause and effect here. We have bad outcomes because we spend so much money on chronic conditions. That's why we have bad outcomes. And so if you were to adjust for obesity, we actually have phenomenal outcomes. So that's kind of the interesting thing that people just don't think about. Like, the United States has 50% more obese people per capita than almost any other country on the planet. And so, it's just, if you are obese, your health outcomes are going to be worse. You are going to spend more money on healthcare. That's just a fact. And so, CrowdHealth, what we're kind of focused on is like people who understand the healthcare system is against you, which we kind of just went through, right? Those people are signing up for CrowdHealth. People who understand that the food system is against you, which leads to obesity and metabolic health, issues. Those are the people who are signing up for CrowdHealth. And a lot of times the people who, know that the monetary system is set up against them, those are the people who are joining CrowdHealth too. They know that the systems are against them, and CrowdHealth is trying to, eliminate some of those issues that the other systems are creating.
Definitely. And one point that you mentioned there that I wanted to bring up is it's impossible to escape the topic of incentives. It's everywhere. It's all around us. And we talked earlier about how the insurance companies and the whole mess of the medical care system is really incentivized to not help patients, but to add more administrative work to make more money. At the same time, how would you describe this system incentivizes the actual population in terms of their health? Like, because it doesn't seem like it's really convincing people that they should live their healthiest, best life, because the prices are such a black hole. They don't know what it's going to be. or it's always going to be the same no matter how healthy they are. Like when I was signing up for health insurance through my previous jobs, they never had any sort of filter for, do you weigh 180 or do you weigh 300? Do you smoke? It doesn't ask you these things because it's all just sort of the cookie cutter. So
Yeah.
what problems does that cause?
Yeah, I think it caused big problems. And you'd think that taking care of your health, you should be incentivized not monetarily, but just, when you're in your 60s, 70s, and 80s, like it's terrible to, have cancer or one of these chronic conditions or whatever. And so you'd think people would act in their best interest. But we're so high time preference, in this country, where we want what's good for us right now, and oftentimes that's the bag of Cheetos or whatever, right?
I mean, we just look
And
at the government recommended food pyramid and it says
yeah, I mean, it's
have a bunch
crazy.
of grains.
Yeah, it's crazy. And so people eat that now, and they're like, oh, I don't have to worry about it for 30 or 40 years. And I don't have to pay for it now if something occurs because I have health insurance. And so the incentives are really screwed up. I posted something on Twitter. It looks like on August 1st. It says it's a message from one of our members. It says, "I love Crowd Health. The one thing I noticed when I joined is the fact that since I dumped my health insurance, I'm now very conscious about eating healthy and taking care of myself. Having health insurance before made it so I ignored these things." There's something about part of you being self-sovereign, right? Like, or increasing more sovereignty into your life that incentivizes you to take better care of yourself. And we have just dozens of these examples where people are like, I've joined Crowd Health. I'm a part of this community. This community is really into like the food that we eat and how we use our bodies and things like that. And I am significantly better. I had a guy the other day DM me, and I'm sorry if I'm on my phone here too, because I like to find these things so I
Oh,
can
go
actually
for it.
give you the
Yeah.
real thing. He's like, I had to lose weight to become a part of Crowd Health because we don't let anybody in who's over 240. And he sent me a picture of him and his wife, who both lost weight to be a part of Crowd Health. They were in a triathlon, and his wife placed first in their age group, and he placed fourth in his age group. And he's one that was way overweight and had to lose weight to be a part of Crowd Health. I'm like, how freaking cool is that? Like, if you
Hmm.
can get people to change their behavior over a period of time so that they don't have congestive heart failure or COPD or, cardiovascular disease when they're 70, 80, or 90, like, that's a way to change your healthcare system. Like, we're finding better prices, but we don't have these awful conditions, these awful diseases when we're in our 70s and our 80s. And that is human flourishing. Like, if we could incentivize that, that's what we're all about. In August, we're making this test called the VO2 max test, fundable by the community. This is not something a health insurance plan would pay for. But one of the doctors that we follow, Dr. Peter Attia, says it's the number one correlated metric for how long you'll live. And it's basically, you breathe into this tube while you're running, and it shows how much oxygen your body uses in activity, right? And if your body uses a lot of oxygen or can hold a lot of oxygen, then that means you're in good metabolic shape, or sorry, good cardiovascular shape. And so we're paying for these VO2 maxes for people to go out and get and be like, okay, are you healthy? Are you not healthy? Like, we want people to know how their body operates so that they can make the lifestyle changes to ensure that their body is working effectively. Again, so that their 70s or 80s, they're living healthy lives and can play with their grandkids out in the backyard. Like, that's really important to me.
Totally. So I think we've given people enough nibbles of these awesome stories and testimonials from people who, like, we both know are very trustworthy. Let's start from the drawing board here. So we've given people a little bit of background on the Fiat system, and the incentives are all screwed up. No one's working for you. There's no patient to doctor transaction relationship in this old system. So Where does CrowdHealth come in? If you could just start from the drawing board, what do you guys do that's completely different from this system?
Yeah. So one thing we kind of talked about was that, people understand that health insurance or healthcare is expensive. So the big question is how do we drop those prices? And as we talked about earlier, a big, huge chunk of that is administrative costs. So let's figure out how to rip the administrative costs out from the fee structure or the cost structure of these doctors. Um, and the way to do that is to pay in cash. And so that's the kind of the secret sauce of what we do is we enable people to pay in cash. So then they don't have to have billing people. You're paying 1.5% of credit card fees if you pay, with a credit card versus 30 or 40% if you were to pay in, a health insurance plan. Then the other thing here is the doctors now don't have to fight the health insurance plans to get these procedures approved. They spend about 30% of their time fighting with health insurance plans. Okay, so now we have 30% of the admin costs are for health and billing health insurance. 30% of the doctor's time is dealing with health insurance. And so if you can take those two things out, then you can get significantly lower pricing and the doctor will give you, 40, 50, 60% discounts on what they would charge health plans, right? So I went to the doctor's office, cardiologist a few months ago, and what a health plan pays was something like $250. What I paid, I think it was like $147, something like that, because I paid in cash at the point of care. And so for CrowdHealth, what we're really trying to do is saying for the big events, for the small events, like people are okay with paying $150 to go see the doctor, like they get that. But what happens with the really big events? So I'll give you a real example. I live in Austin. We had a woman here who was playing pickleball and tore her ACL. So she went to the orthopedic surgeon who said that was $24,000 to do that surgery. Okay. She calls us. She's like, it's going to be $24,000. And so we called the doctor. We said, hey, listen, what if we paid you in cash? He's like, okay, well, if you pay in cash, I'll give you, I think it was like a 30% discount. And then we said, okay, well, it looks like you're doing this procedure in a hospital as opposed to a surgery center. So can we move it from the hospital to the surgery center, which has a lower cost? He's like, sure, we're happy to do that. That ACL tear, which depending on how you calculate, all in, it was $24,000. Was ended up being something like $11,000 after that conversation. So we paid in cash, saved a bunch of money, moved it from a hospital to a surgery center, saved a bunch of money. And so that's how we were able to, get our members are paying half of what you would pay with a health insurance company because we're taking out all of that administrative stuff that inflates the price. And so that's the beauty of CrowdHealth. One component of this people might asking is like, I don't have $12,000 to pay for my ACL tear. How do you do that? Well, that woman paid $500, and then CrowdHealth has thousands of people in our community that we go to and we say, hey, will you help this woman in Austin with her ACL tear? So we had to raise, I don't know, something like $11,500. And so can we get 115 of our people to give her $100 to help her with that? And so we go to 115 people. They all said yes. $100 went from their account to this woman's account. So then she had enough so that when she showed up at the doctor's office, she could pay the $11,500 plus her $500, the $12,000 for that surgery. And that's the way that we operate. And now it might seem kind of complex, might sound odd, but we can automate a lot of the stuff on the back end. So we help you with all of that money movement and stuff. So it's not that hard to do, but that's a real life example of how we cut more than 50% out of the system by just paying in cash. So that's how we do that.
So there are a few different facets to it. Basically, you've got the So you're acting as an entity to work directly with customers. Say it's me. I'm a member, by the way. I've been I didn't even mention that. Um, I come to you and say, hey, I need to I broke my arm. I need to go get help. So
Hmm.
you first of all you negotiate with the doctors on our behalf.
Yep,
You reach out to these people. You find the best deal possible, and if it's still a big price at the end, uh, it's a crowdfunding pool of other people that are part of this system.
that's right.
So would you call that sort of the two main facets of the business?
I think so. Yeah, I mean
Mhm.
the negotiation of the bill and then the funding of the bill are two major components of the business for sure.
Cool. So a couple
Yeah.
of things that I can imagine people would wonder, and I did as well, was first of all, how do you make money? And that's just through the
Mhm.
premiums, right? You just have a percentage of the premiums that is your main revenue stream. Is that right?
No, we don't even have a percentage. So it's
Okay.
you pay us a subscription fee to be a member of CrowdHealth. So if
So
you're a
that's
member of
like the
CrowdHealth,
premium replacer. You don't call it
it's
premium,
a
it's more of a
premium
subscription.
replacer, sure.
Okay.
So we actually bill you twice per month, which is kind of interesting. The first bill is just on the anniversary of the date in which you started. So if you started on August 15th, I would bill you $50 on September 15th and $50 on October 15th, right? Per person. And then we throughout the month when Ben breaks his arm, we'll go come back to you and say, "Hey, we want the ability to ask you for up to an additional $125 to help Ben with his broken arm or Wendy with her ACL tear or whoever, right?" And so we'll come to you and we'll send you an email and says, member in Austin, Texas, tore her ACL. She needs this amount of money. Would you be willing to give this amount? And that's an email that we send you, and we just send one per month, and then you can say yes to that or no to that. If you say yes to that, then we invoice you through Stripe. It goes directly from your account to Wendy's account or whoever you're funding, so that Wendy has enough in her bank account to then go and pay for her broken arm or ACL tear or whatever. So one of the issues that, as we mentioned earlier, is if we can profit as a percentage of the premium, then we're going to want your premium to go up. But in fact, what we do is we have a standard $50 per month subscription fee. That's all we take. And so we have every incentive possible to keep your crowdfunding numbers down. Because if I can keep your crowdfunding numbers down, more people will join the community. That's better for us. And it's better for the community because you have more people. So the incentives are directly aligned with our members in that way.
And that's
So
also why you have certain filters to make sure people are healthy. Like, and I believe
yeah,
it's you can't smoke, you can't be over a certain weight or BMI, is that right?
yeah, it's you can't be a smoker, you can't be over 240 pounds. We do make exceptions for people who are 6'8" or something like that. And then if you're in Medicare, the Medicare population, we have these really silly rules in the United States where it's really hard for us to operate within that Medicare population. So we don't serve Medicare population yet. But those are the three things that we will say, hey, it doesn't work.
Yeah, so basically it's like a great system if you really want to be your healthiest because you're going to save a bunch of money and
Yeah,
you're going to be part of this community that is in the same system as you, also really driven to be their best self, and they aren't going to be racking up all these bills all the time.
yeah.
But
So
even
Ben,
that
as you
said,
as a member of Crowd Health in August or July, I don't know how long you've been around. Um, if you're a full-time member, you would in July, which is say it would have been $50 subscription fee, and then we only asked for $60 on top of that. So it was $110 total, which is about the same you pay for your cell phone, right? For your healthcare. And so we can ask up to 125, but we've only asked for like 60 of that 125, historically. And it's going to be, I think it's probably going to be the same in September too. So we're not even asking for all of the money because healthcare expenses have been so low. People have allowed us to find them really great doctors. And look, we just have a healthy population of people. Like we have a bunch of dudes in their mid 30s. I mean, it's 34 is the average age. It's 65% males. 35% females. We do have a lot of babies because females in their mid 30s have a lot of babies. So in essence, what you end up paying for is lots of active injuries because males in their 30s do that. And you pay for a lot of babies, which most people in the community are like, dude, I'll pay for, an active injury, somebody trying to be physically fit and, face plants on their bike, or people who are pregnant and trying to populate the planet. Like, heck yeah, like we'll do that. And so we have a kind of a missionally aligned group who are all in for funding those things,
And I
which
think
means
that's a good.
when we ask for crowdfunding, it's something like 98.7% of the time people say yes when
Mhm.
we ask for crowdfunding. So
Because that's got to be an obvious retort you get from people is like, oh, it sounds too kumbaya. Everyone's just going to help each other all the time. Like, there's no way that'll work. But so how does that happen? How are people incentivized to do this? Because I can say from my experience, when I see an email that says so and so got an injury, will you help? I say, yeah, of course, I'd love to
yeah,
help because, and you can talk about this too, but it helps you later on if you were to have a health event to have a good report card of helping people in the past. So that basically keeps people in line. So maybe you can elaborate
yeah,
on how that all works.
sure. So when you if Ben were to ask for funding for his health event, I would let the community know two main things about Ben that help them decide whether they want to help him. One is Ben a good member of the community? So the last 10 times he's been asked, has he said yes, 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 or has he said no, 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 no? Right. And if he says no to all the other community members, he's not a very good member. Like, why would I say yes to Ben when he says no to everybody? It's kind of like a eBay reputational score. And then the second thing is Ben, getting a good price for his service, and the way that we look at that is saying, hey, if I have a doctor within 25 miles of Ben that can do the procedure, yet Ben chooses somebody that is more than 20% more expensive, then we note that in the request. So Ben is not treating your money like it's his money. Ben has decided to go and get a super expensive doctor when there was a lower cost opportunity in his area. So those are the two things that put some guardrails on this, so that people aren't going to go to the Mayo Clinic for a flu, right? Or aren't just going to say no to everybody, and then all of a sudden expect that people are going to say yes to them. And that has been really effective in kind of navigating that community.
Hmm.
So
I'm
it's
sure that's probably
like
been a
we're
learning process too, right? Like people just thinking they can come in and just get a bunch of help from people but not give back. Like
right.
it's not going to work. You can't
And
do
it doesn't
fraud
work that
because
way in any community, right?
yeah.
Like, it doesn't work in that. Think about your neighbors, like your literal neighbors. Like, if you're crappy to your neighbors and you play, beat music at however many decibels all Saturday, and then you then go ask them, or they come and ask you for sugar, you're probably like, dude, like, you're a terrible neighbor. Like, I'm not gonna help you.
Yeah.
And so it's just how we're built as human beings. If there's people within the tribe that aren't pulling their weight, guess what? They get kicked out of the tribe. It just is that's how it works. So we deal with this in many different ways. And some people say, oh, well, this is a social score or something like that. I was like, no, this is not a social score. This is just saying, like, have you helped your community members or not? Like, I'm not tracking what you're buying or what you're looking at on your computers or anything like that. It's just it tells us if you're a good community member.
And I think people are just so jaded by the regulation ridden world just never working for them that they don't understand that this is like not humans' natural state is working together, helping each other out as a community when you need it. Like this was way before any of the healthcare, the health insurance happened. That
Totally.
was how it was. You have a community of people that are all on the same team. You care about each other. You help each other when you need it. When you don't need help, it feels good to help other people. And this is just making that a little bit more systematic in a business sense. It makes it really function as a well-oiled machine for all the people involved.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's right. It's interesting if you want to kind of bring Bitcoin into this conversation. I know that not all of your followers are
We
Bitcoiners,
had to
but
do it.
I know I had to do it. I can't go a podcast without talking about it. But it's one of the things that when I first got into Bitcoin, which was a few years ago, I heard this thing about self-sovereignty. And so I was like, okay, so are self-sovereignty and community mutually exclusive? And what I found is that's not the case. And in fact,
Hmm.
people want people in their community who are self-sovereign because they're really good community members. They're taking care of their own crap. And then, if something bad happens to somebody, like that community will gather, like it will come around you. And so I feel like the Bitcoin community is a strong one. And there's skirmishes clearly, within the Bitcoin community that are kind of fun to watch. But within any family or community or whatever, there's skirmishes. Like it just happens. But I think people, if you're taking care of your own stuff, if you take a self-sovereign approach to life, there is very much community there of other people who feel the same way, and that those communities can be incredibly powerful. And that's why I think the Bitcoin community is such a powerful community to be a part of.
I think that's a great point. Self sovereignty does not mean you're antisocial. It just means you want to be able to sustain yourself without other people's help. And
Yeah,
you go to any Bitcoin conference or hop on Twitter or Nostr or wherever you may be, and you'll see that people are extremely social. They have a lot of extra bandwidth for social connection because they have their shit handled and they're not
yeah,
asking for help all the time. And when you have a lot of those people together, they have like the collective amount of bandwidth they have to help each other and participate in the community is much bigger. So I think it's a really beautiful combination when you bring it all together for sure. And
totally agree.
speaking of the sovereignty aspect, one of the main reasons why I jumped on board with CrowdHealth myself was because I'm a bit of a nomad. I go all over the place, and
Love that.
my previous job
Where are you
I
now? That looks beautiful in the background. Like
oh
you're in
yeah,
some place not in Texas, that's for
I
sure.
I take my background seriously here for sure. I'm back home right now in Washington, but
Okay.
I actually my previous job I worked at Fold and I was based in Austin as well. I was going to all the Bitcoin meetups and everything. I ended up moving to Mexico to live there for a little bit, and then I went over to Florida. I went to the Bitcoin conference and decided to stay for a while, and now I'm back visiting family in
Love it.
Washington. So I'm all over the place. And one of the problems that we haven't even touched on here for traditional health insurance and employment connected health insurance is that it's a pain in the ass when you're outside of the network that they put you in. They put you in this box for a place. So I
Yeah.
was with Aetna when I started. I clicked the box. I'm in Austin, so they're like, okay, you're with Aetna. So even when I was in Austin, there were problems. But then when I move out of Austin, it's like now what do I do? Like I don't none of these people are in my network. So
Yeah.
this was a big one for me. And I shout out to John Gordon. I knew he was a crowd health guy as
Oh
well.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I hit him up and I chatted with him about this. And he pitched me well and it worked, man. He basically just told me this is bringing like person to person connection back, the
Mm-hmm.
patient to doctor, and the way that you are structured is it's perfect for digital nomads and people that
Totally.
travel
It's perfect.
because you're just well actually let me shut up and let you explain why it's great.
Yeah, no, so there's no networks. So you don't have to worry about if your doctor's in network or out of network or anything. Like go to whatever doctor you want. We don't have networks, which is great. And so you can be in Washington or Austin or Florida or Mexico if you want to be. The only thing that we ask you is that you have to have a United States address, and it's for a variety of regulatory reasons. But you have to have a U.S. address. But if you're out and about and you're traveling, and even if for extended amount of time, um, Jimmy Song, who I think everybody or a lot of the Bitcoin people know. I'm sure Ben, you know him or know of him. He traveled with his family for the last year all over the world, and he's a Crowd Health member. And he was like, "Is this okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, dude. Like, yeah, we don't care." We had one of the greatest health events that we had to fund was a guy that was vacationing. I think it was an extended vacation in Croatia, and so he was on an island. I think hurt himself, broke his leg or something. And so he's like, "Hey, I kind of have this kind of ambulance bill. I just want to see if you guys can help me with." I'm like, "Okay." And he's like, "It was actually a boat ambulance because I had to get from the island, to the mainland and something like that." And we're like, Dude, that's awesome. Like, that's great. Like, I think it was like $200 or something. It wasn't that big of a deal. But yeah, you can go wherever you want. And as long as you have a United States address, then you're good to go. So, one of the things we were talking about earlier, like the craziness of health insurance is, that deductible that we talked about earlier is in network deductible. So you can literally go to a hospital that's in network, but the anesthesiologist is out of network. And so if you get put under by an anesthesiologist that's out of network, it doesn't apply to your in network. And guess what? You're under anesthesia. Like, you have no idea. Like, it's not like you're going to ask the anesthesiologist when he walks in. He's like, "Oh, are you part of the Aetna network?"
Probably
And
makes their
so,
job easier. You're asleep. They can do whatever they want.
yeah, they do whatever they want, and so that's the craziness of this. Is you hear this all the time where people are like, "Holy crap, like, I went to Ascension Seton and I went to the ER, but the ER doctor is not a part of our network, but Ascension Seton is a part of the network." Like, it doesn't make any sense. There's no networks at CrowdHealth. You don't have to worry about that stuff. We want to make it simple on you. And even that, like, if you want to go to a naturopathic doctor or an integrative doctor, or you're not into kind of the Western medicine, like, you can do that too. Like, this is up to you as to how you want your care to be provided. We're not dictating that. It's between you and your doctor.
And that's a good point I hadn't even thought of before. I feel like people in this community are much more open-minded to the alternative medicine, if you will, of different types of things outside of the main hospitals.
Yeah.
And because of that, if I were to go on some trip to some river somewhere and, maybe find something that isn't as normal in the US, or I don't know if you've ever had that before where people say, like, I did some psychedelics to get over some brain trauma or something. Has that ever happened? And has that been supported by the
It
community? Or is
has
that like a
not
totally.
happened, and I don't know how we would deal with it, because I think that, like, a part of me is like, look, man, you got to do what you got to do.
Hmm.
One of the real examples here, though, is like, I put this on Twitter, I think a couple weeks ago. 1.4% of births in the United States are home births. 1.4%. Crowd Health, it's almost 50%. So
Wow.
almost half of the babies born with members of Crowd Health are born at home. And that just gives you kind of an insight into the group of people that we have, which they are very much anti, being in this big structure full of, diseases and bacteria, and way more desirous of being at home, giving birth kind of the natural way that,
Just getting back to
we were,
nature in all
yeah,
forms.
getting the way that we were created to do it. And as a result of that, we just have healthy people. Like, we have a self-selected group of people that are just healthy, and, are very confident giving birth at home because they're of natural weight. They don't have any risk factors, and the vast majority of the time they'll be fine. Right. So it is an interesting thing. And we're like, people ask us all the time, "Can I do a home birth?" And we're like, "You mean we don't have to, the community doesn't have to pick up your hospital fees?" Hell yeah. You can do it at home. And
Mhm.
so it's just kind of an interesting stat that I thought that your listeners would find interesting.
Definitely. And one of the things I'm sure some people will be thinking at this point was we talked earlier about how the government system is a total mess and it's super expensive and it's really just not helpful for the patients, but it makes a lot of people a lot of money. Here we have this disruptive system, which is great. It's cheaper for users and it doesn't pad the pockets of the fiat lords. So a natural question would be, like, how are they, like, letting you do this? Have you had to butt up against any regulatory bodies to make this possible, or is it possible to happen in the future? But I'm sure that's one question people might have after really getting a deep understanding of each side of this. Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, we've had interesting interactions with two regulatory authorities. I will keep them anonymous. Both times they kind of came out of this being like, "Yeah, you're following all the regulations that we currently have," and so I think they just don't know what to do with us,
Hmm.
because just
Kind
the
of
way
like
that we
Bitcoiners in fiat money, same thing.
totally,
It's like,
they're like, "I have no idea
they're
how to
not
deal with
breaking
you
any
all."
rules; they're just doing their own thing.
Yeah,
So.
exactly. We're living in this gray area where there aren't a lot of laws around what we are doing. And so far we've been able to do this effectively. And in the two regulatory interactions that we've had are with some states that are known to be, um, anti health insurance alternative type of states. So we feel really good about where the model is right on the regulatory side, and we have incredible regulatory attorneys. And and interestingly, I'm actually, I want a regulatory lawsuit that we can go and take to court, because I think what the courts will find is that we are not health insurance, and I want to set that precedent. And I can't wait actually for a state that allows us to go down that path with them, so that we can set a precedent, in the courts, that show that we're not health insurance. Your listeners just heard how we operate. That is not at all like health insurance. And people understand that when they sign up. So we're not trying to pull the wool over everybody's eyes. Like, on our homepage, it says we are not health insurance, and that is a
Yeah.
good thing. So we're not trying to
Yeah.
hide that we're not health insurance. So we'll see what happens, but so far so good.
And I mean, just the community you've built around this, you have such a great standing amongst so many well-respected Bitcoiners, these people who have great followings and a lot of access to people who care about all this. So even if things were to get ugly, I can't imagine a better group of people to be surrounded with who want you to win. And everyone wants this to happen because it helps people. And it's the same reason why people are so into Bitcoin, despite the regulator or the regulatory unclarity. We just know that this is better. Like, people that have a moral compass are going to support that no matter what, and they're going to
Totally.
die doing it. So
Yeah, totally.
I just think that's awesome. And usually that's when people bring up concerns like that, that's a sign to me that they haven't been very far into the rabbit hole, or they just don't have a very strong sense of moral values. Because to me, I don't care what they say. Like, I'm going to do what I think is right no matter what. And I think it's everyone in Bitcoin is similar. So it's just a really cool
Yeah.
group to be around.
Yeah, and I would say, I don't know, maybe a third, maybe it's even more than that. Half of our members are Bitcoiners. I would say we have a very, even the ones who aren't Bitcoiners have a very kind of libertarian, bend to them. That it's like, these big structures, people are really figuring out, especially over the last 3 years, right? They are not being created. The rules aren't being drawn to benefit us. The rules are being drawn to benefit others and to enrich others. And so, that I think fog is clearing a little bit. I think more and more people are seeing this. Less and less are saying, "Oh, you're just conspiracy theorists." They're actually saying, "Oh, wow, like this is bad. Like this, there is some deviance here." Um, I heard something the other day. I was like, yeah, people who used to call them conspiracy theories are now calling them spoiler alerts. It's like, it's like these things are coming true. These are not conspiracy theories anymore. Which is kind of an interesting thing. But I think COVID, I think highlighted a lot, like, about the craziness that's going on in our system. And hits our healthcare system. It hits our monetary system. It hits our food system. And the three kind of big groups of people who are joining CrowdHealth are the ones that are realizing, finally, these systems are not built for you. They're not built to protect you. They're built to fleece you. And that's the kind of unanimous view across all the CrowdHealth members, is that these systems are not built for you.
And if anyone wants to push back against that and stick with their government plan, you are more than welcome to do that.
Go for
We're
it.
not
I'm
trying to tell
not
people
telling
to
you.
stop.
Yeah, go
This is
for it. You
just
have other options.
yeah, this is just opening up the door to competition, which is the way that it should be. And
Yeah.
when there's
Yeah.
competition, simply it creates better outcomes for consumers, because when there are more choices in the marketplace, people will naturally go to the one that works better for them.
Yeah.
And it's good
Go
for
for it.
everybody.
Have fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Awesome.
you just got to own the consequences. Don't make me pay for your consequences. That's all I'm asking.
Yeah,
Right.
totally. And that all comes back to the self-sovereignty bit we talked about too. So
Yeah.
what's the long-term vision for CrowdHealth? Is it pretty much to scale up this same model you have now, or are there other ideas you have down the road, or how does that look?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have some other ideas coming down the road. I think some of them are going to be short term and some of them are going to be long term. I mean, what I really think, I'm going to go to Bitcoin again for a second here, and I apologize to the folks who aren't into it, but
No
I truly
apologies for
believe
Bitcoin.
that
That's a
You
rule
know,
of the podcast. Never.
I think the circularity of Bitcoin, I personally think, and I know that some other maxis out there will probably disagree with me, but like I think it's really important to more mass adoption of Bitcoin. And so I'd like to see more line items in your budget being able to be purchased with Bitcoin. I want to be able to you to use to, and that's not saying like hold less Bitcoin. I'm saying use more of the dollars, convert them to Bitcoin, use, and being able to transact in Bitcoin, right? And so I think I'm 80% sure that we're going to be able to do what we're doing on CrowdHealth completely over the Lightning Network in January.
Amazing.
And so
That's
like take
awesome.
out the dollar component of this, do it over the Lightning Network. We're working with some people who are very well known in the kind of the Bitcoin world to help us do that. I mean, we got to get through all kinds of regulatory hurdles and things like that, but we're trying to do that because I think that's the future ultimately. Like if we can use Bitcoin more in healthcare, which is the biggest industry on the planet, it's $4.3 trillion a year. Then I think that goes a long way to mass adoption of Bitcoin. And so I'd really like to do that. And so we're working hard to do that. And I think, you'll see an announcement here in the next month or so on how exactly we're going to do that. So that's super fun. But in essence, we signed up 5,000 people. I mean, I'd like to be at 200,000 over the next 5 years. I like, at least 10% of those transactions, hopefully more, to be in Bitcoin. And I'd like that 10% to be on the upward trend, 10% this year, 12% following year, 14% the next year, so that we can, see that move. I mean, we're not playing the short game here. We're playing the long game, both in terms of reducing healthcare costs and, utilizing, an alternative to the dollar. But I mean, ultimately, I want to see more people be uninsured in our country as opposed to being, instead of being insured. And that's kind of contradictory to everything that you hear. But I truly believe that health insurance is sucking the life out of especially the middle class. The middle class has not gotten a pay raise adjusted for healthcare inflation in about 30 or 40 years. Like it's been flat for 30 or 40 years, and it's primarily due to healthcare expenses. And so I was like, let's get the middle class a pay raise. And you can do that by taking out the expenses. So
And that's
the
why
healthcare.
you're getting these insane negotiations, because there's so much meat on that bone to be improved on. Like there's such a massive amount of bloat that you can cut out. That's why you get such drastic reductions in costs for people that use CrowdHealth, which is
Yeah, absolutely.
when I see these numbers, like you were talking about the ACL tear, I believe it was like less than half. I mean,
Yeah.
that's crazy. That's like life-changing amount of money for people. So
Yeah, totally.
it's awesome.
Totally.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
So we just crossed the hour mark, man. I want to make sure I don't keep you here too long. How's your schedule looking? Are you okay for a few more minutes here?
A few more minutes. Yeah.
Awesome. So one quick question I want to throw out selfishly here is because I'm reading The Big Fat Surprise right now. Have you read that book before?
I haven't read it.
It's it's by Nina Teicholz. It's, you mentioned Jimmy Song earlier, and he's a big meat eating guy, and I know that we briefly mentioned earlier the food pyramid. What do you know about the food pyramid, and just what's your view on how the government has formed this idea of what's healthy for people, and and how is it screwed up? This is kind of a tangent, but I gotta ask it because
Wow.
you're in the health world.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's totally screwed up, and I think the food pyramid was primarily built by corporate interests that were heavy on grains, clearly in an inflationary time where they were trying to reduce the food prices for people, and grains were the kind of lowest cost option, and so we ended up building our food pyramid based upon costs, not necessarily on nutrition. And everybody followed suit. Everybody was incentivized to keep that in place because it meant that all of these big food organizations were, profiting handsomely. all the as we saw, diabetes go from 1% to now it's about 10%, with another 33% of the population being pre-diabetic. All these pharma companies being being able to push their drugs on us because of the poor lifestyle choices we're making, are creating additional chronic conditions, which then the pharma companies can pump us full of drugs, right? It's this never ending circle of corporate interest. And people might say that's a conspiracy theory, but it's just it's happening. Like I don't know how you can see anything different than that. And so you see all these people who are on more carnivore, keto, type of diets, who are metabolically more healthy. It's just very difficult to argue with. I think if you kind of look back into our history as just Homo sapiens, we have historically been primarily a carnivorous type of species. So I think our food system is totally screwed up, and you can see it. Like I said earlier, we're 50% more more obese than the other first world countries. We have seed oils, which again people are like, oh, seed oils, that's like way overblown, but it's like, no, like we are way higher in the seed oils, canola oil, that kind of crap than other even European countries are. And I think you can see it directly related to how fat we are. I mean, we're just an obese country. I mean, you can go to any water park out there and be like, what the heck is going on here? And I think it's partly because of food. It's partly because of education. It's partly because we're not, incentivized to really care about our weight. And so, it's all of these things that I think are contributing to the obesity problem that we currently have. But yeah, it starts with the food pyramid. When you start there, it's hard to recover from that. So, and funny thing is that the same group of people that made the food pyramid originally was put together to figure out starvation in our country. So they got together. They're like, oh, guess what? The data is telling us that people aren't starving anymore. And so we have to do something. We have to be purposeful in this little committee. And so
They
instead,
spent a bunch of money and resources, so it'd be like embarrassing if they don't have something that comes out of it.
they have to put together something. And so let's put this food pyramid. And apparently the food pyramid was developed in like 48 hours, like with a bunch of politicians, and it wasn't even scientifically endorsed. And then the politicians got the scientists to say, kind of like what they're doing with some of the crazy crap that's going on now. Like the politicians are getting the scientists to agree that this is the right way of doing it, and it's lasting until this day. The food compass is one of the funniest things I think I've ever seen. It was built by some scientist in Emory. I think it was Emory or something like that, where I kid you not, Lucky Charms are more nutritious than a ribeye steak on their food compass. Lucky Charms.
I'll put it in the show notes. It's absolutely amazing.
What the hell is going on here? Like this is nuts, right? And so
it's incredible.
I don't understand how people can look themselves in the mirror and say Lucky Charms, full of these little tasty marshmallows, they're tasty, is better for you than a ribeye. Like I just don't understand this. It's totally nuts. It's totally nuts. But look, if you tell people that steaks are good for you, then you also have to tell people that your LDL being your LDL cholesterol being high is not that bad for you, which statins, again, back to the pharma, are probably the most profitable drug ever created. There is a financial downfall of pharma if people start eating lots and lots of meat. So, I mean, it's just it's craziness. And I think the Bitcoin community is like understanding that if you can do something crazy with the monetary system, you also can be incentivized to do things crazy with the food system. And you're also incentivized to do crazy things with the healthcare system. And all three of these things are intertwined.
Absolutely. And Oh, it's just an exciting time to be alive, man. Just to try all these different things, experiment for the first time ever. A lot of people have been so stuck just following the rules and not exploring with themselves. And I can say that in my own time when I was in Mexico, I was there for 6 months, like I said, and the place I was staying had this beautiful grill outside. So I took that as my calling
Mm,
to make it my first time to really test this thing out. I had eggs and bacon every single morning and a big juicy steak with a slab of butter on it every night for about 6 months,
sounds
give or
great.
take, a few random nights out that I cheated. I was 95% locked in, and I've never felt better in my life. I like the fat fell off of me, the little love handles I had going into it, mental clarity was insane. I was just getting things done. And so I'm just really fascinated by this whole rabbit hole. I'm still relatively new to it. We could Jimmy Song is a veteran at this point. He's eating nothing but steaks for how many years now, and he looks amazing. He's doing fantastic. Like, and Safedine too. He's another straight carnivore. So
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
well,
Safety and I, he was on my podcast. We just released it this week. We talked a little bit about that. I saw Jimmy
oh,
yesterday,
cool.
and he looks great. So, yeah, I mean, I think that people out there, if you're listening to this and you do, have some metabolic issues or weight issues, or you just don't feel, you feel this fog. I mean, man, we felt this fog before. I felt the fog before. Ben, sounds like you have too. Like, give this a shot. Like, try to cut carbs out of your diet and do it for a couple weeks and just see how you feel, because that'll be long enough that you'll feel different. There is a chemistry in your body that changes as a result of this, that I think I'm very confident that you will feel significantly different, and that fog will start to part and you won't go back. Um, so I'm with you, Ben. I mean, currently I'm 90% kind of keto. I have kids and they like having pizza on Friday nights, and so I'll do pizza with them on Friday nights. But it's kind of my one. I don't think we have to be super dogmatic about this. You can splurge once in a while, and that's not that big of a deal. But I think long term, people will really find that the animal protein heavy diet is a good one.
Yeah, I'll definitely never say I'm perfect either. There's just there's too many things happening in life all the time that someday if I get a really good steady routine, I would love to commit full 100%, but life's a little crazy right now, doing a lot of traveling, a lot of things going on, so it's important people don't feel bad if they aren't perfect either. It's all about making
Yeah,
improvements, experimenting, and just taking these mental notes of what things and how your body reacts when trying these different experiments. So
yeah, totally,
appreciate
totally.
you for humoring me on that tangent. That could be a
No,
good
all good.
cliffhanger
I
for
love
a
that.
future conversation. Um, I'm going to send you a copy of this book to read because I think you would love it. It goes really deep into the history of the how the diet has changed over time. I think it would give you a lot of interesting insights. But
Would love that.
we can keep that as a cliffhanger for a future conversation. I'd love to do this again. Andy Schoonover, CEO of CrowdHealth, thank you so much for coming on. Do you have any final words as sort of a summarizing message you want to send out to the world?
Yeah, look, I think that I'd love for y'all to join us. Clearly, I mean, I think that if you are a part of the health insurance system, I hate to say this so bluntly, but I'm a blunt human being. You are somewhat complicit in allowing this to continue. We only can see this thing fall, and I think it needs to burn if we all back out of it. So if you're getting it through your employer, I really say, like, take a look at what we're doing, and I think we can offer you something that's better, more freedom. And so come join us. I'd love to have you involved in crowd health.
Fantastic. I'll put those links all down in show notes as well so everyone can go learn more and get educated. Um, thank you so much, Andy. I really appreciate you coming by, and we'll be in touch for sure, my friend.
Cool. Thanks, man.
Excellent. Have a good one.
You too.